I mean, I think the World Cup, just because, of what it all means from a deeper perspective, like every country, pays attention, you really represent your country on a much larger scale. So, I play in the Premier League for Watford. I'm still representing my country, but on a smaller scale, and I always like the fact of when you play for your country, it's something bigger. And so I've always liked that about the World Cup and the standard at those tournaments.
The VAR Show. The one place for your weekly football update.
So hello, a very warm welcome to VAR Show, the show which talks about all the various major football leagues in detail. Today we are going to connect with interviews, and we have Mr. DeMerit, who has played for the likes of Watford, Vancouver Whitecaps, US men national team, among a host of other teams. So without wasting much time, I would like to first thank Jay for coming on the show. Thank you and welcome to the show. And I would like to begin by asking you, how are you and what are you doing these days?
I'm doing very well. First off, thank you for having me. Anytime I can come on and share my story, it's truly, in my opinion, what it's all about. To be a former player and to lend my experiences is truly what we get to at this point in our careers. And so, to answer your question today, I do a couple different things. I'm an ambassador, so I still work for Watford a little bit. I started a youth program focusing on youth leadership in teenagers, so ages 12 plus. So that spends a lot of my time, and I'm currently settled in Vancouver, Canada, just north of the U.S. border in Canada. So I run the programs and do most of my work up here. But yeah, very happy and very healthy. So happy to be here.
Yeah, I have two segues from your answer, and probably that would come more later in the question what I had prepared. But the first one is you like sharing your story. You also have a movie made on you. How did that happen?
Yeah, well, that's Rise and Shine. And so Rise and Shine kind of what started my whole purpose of my post-career. So in 2011, just after the World Cup, I got approached by a couple filmmakers that wanted to. Basically, they said, when you walk to Europe and you kind of, again, I was living on attic floors and playing in the 12th division in the UK. And to only 6 years later play every minute of a World Cup, for anyone that doesn't know the story, there's a story in there. And, it's how do you believe in yourself when nobody believes in you? How do you get to certain parts of your life and not get comfortable and keep pushing for more and more? And there's a mindset to that. There's a belief system to that. So that's basically what the documentary film talks about, and really chronologically, tells my story in a different way. And the cool part about that is that it was built on Kickstarter. So most people that know what Kickstarter is, people have ideas about products or things, including movies or documentaries, and people donate to the idea. And then for this case, it was to donate to make the movie into a documentary film. So in 70 days, this passionate soccer community, over 1,400 donors around the world, donated their hard-earned money to turn my soccer story into a documentary film called Rise and Shine, the J. DeMerit story. And so that for me, when people donate money to tell your story, for me, that's empowering. It's something that I took on board, and people I don't know that are donating their hard-earned money to tell my story is something that I took very personally. And so now that's mainly what I do. I use Rise and Shine. It's now a charity, a foundation. It's a youth program, and it's also going to be an app, a learning app for kids that will gamify learning in a different way to promote leadership, self-awareness, and mental health in our young adults. So, Rise and Shine was the story that again was empowered through, and you can watch it. It's on YouTube now. It's called Rise and Shine, the J. DeMerit story. So again, if you don't know a lot about me, or if you want to learn more, that's where you find it. But that really empowered me to do what I'm doing now.
Of course. So you did it long before Anelka or maybe Benzema did it.
That's right. We do all sorts of things, but you had to get to those fields first, and that field started in Green Bay, Wisconsin, all by myself.
So the second question that I wanted to ask you, you said you do ambassadorial role for Watford. Does Watford have following in US? or in Canada?
Well, that's part of the reason why is because any club wants to gain their following in lots of different directions, and North America is an emerging market in football. Of course, not emerging, but it's already kind of there. But it's a pretty big market, just behind Asia and India is America for people that follow the sport. So it's still very much an untapped market, and teams like Watford who are Premier League quality, they can use as many fans as they can get. So it's my job to help create engagements through that, to create community initiatives with them, and to be an ambassador for the club. So yeah, it's good fun to, and again, a lot of it's fan engagement. You talk to fans, you go to games, you do social media work with them, you do lots of things like that. So it's good fun for me.
So I'll move back to your career, and maybe if I would have watched your story, maybe we would not have this interview, because I would have known everything about you. So you
That's
moved to
right.
England when you're very young, actually, even in terms of your career and even in terms of your age. Did you always want to move to England? Did you always have that in your mind that, okay, I have to go to England to maybe play there?
No, it wasn't always in my mind. And I think, for me, it was always taking each part of my journey kind of one step at a time. So, I grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, which is just north of Chicago, or people that don't know where that is, it's just north of Chicago in America. And, I didn't play football every day. I was an athlete. So I played basketball, I was track and field, and I played football or soccer. And so I got to 18 years old, and I was like, okay, well, I was a pretty good athlete first, but then soccer was my best sport. So that gave me the opportunity to go play on a scholarship to university, to play football. So only then did I start to realize that I could maybe play professional. I didn't realize I could turn pro till I was about 19 years old. So, I didn't have the dream of playing in England when I was 10. That developed once I got to be a good college soccer player. And then I was kind of like, okay, what are some options to go and try to play pro? Because again, I wasn't picked. I didn't have no one was paying for me to go play somewhere. But I had earned my stripes, and because I didn't come from that environment, because I knew I had only played high level soccer for about 3 or 4 years, from 18 to 22, I still felt like I had a lot to give, and sometimes that's when you have to take it upon yourself. So that's when I did it. Most people that would have picked me didn't know my story, and I wouldn't have been playing soccer every day. So they would have looked at me and said, oh, he's not good enough. But I know my story, and I go, I've only been playing at a high level for 3 years. I am good enough. I just need to show that to people and keep getting better every day. And so that's kind of what created the mindset to go to England. I had an opportunity through a kid I was playing with in Chicago at the time. And he was moving back to England to live with his mom. And so he said, why don't you come with me, and you can try out for some teams there. And again, I knew I had a lot of work to do. I knew I wasn't going to land on English shores and go try out for Chelsea. I knew that I would have to start at the bottom of the barrel, so to speak. And for me, that was the 12th division. So, again, I knew I had to start somewhere. But again, I had the confidence that I could raise the level very quickly. And that's what happened when I moved to England. Within 2 years, again, I tried out for a lot of teams, and very slowly made my way up that ladder. But within the only 2 years, I had my first professional contract for Watford, for at the time, which was a first division team. So, things can happen quickly if you believe and you're good enough.
Of course, and you're like when you look back in hindsight, it looks okay. It was a good move. Did you fear that, okay, going there, like, you never know, anything might happen, like you could probably fail, whereas in the States you already kind of playing, like you said, like you had 3-4 years. So was there any fear?
Yeah, yes, there was fear. Of course, I think there's always fear when you take risks that are big. You have to have fear, I think, but I just don't think that fear should be the driver. And fear should be something you are conscious of, and you should think about. But for me, purpose was driving me. For me, it was belief that was driving me. For me, it was, noticing people around me that I felt I was better that were making it pro. And so I thought, why can't I be one of those people? I know I'm as good as that person. And again, that's just me being honest. That's me knowing I had a lot of work to do. That was me being, I know I'm good, but I'm not that good yet. So, that comes with a bit of humility, if you know what I mean. And so I took that approach, and that really allowed me to get there faster. But I definitely had fear to start. And I think it's naive to think that you shouldn't have fear to do things that are risky.
Of course, and you're like, how, although you speak the same language, like in the States and in England, there's a lot of cultural differences. Like, simply you can just in England maybe you call something chips and you call fries the other place. So even small things like that. How big of a cultural shift was it for you, like when you moved from the States to England?
I mean, it was a pretty big culture shift. I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't a huge world traveler before I started to leave for Europe. The good thing about the States is there's a lot of different things to see there. So I had traveled around. I had done a little bit of South America, Mexico, some of those types of countries, but I had never seen soccer culture like I had seen in England. So for me, that was great to come into there and to see, soccer or football as they call it, in a different light was really inspiring. Any of them are super inspiring, but sorry, my phone I think is acting up. But I knew I had a lot of work to do, but in a way it was inspiring to know that I had seen the crowds, I had seen the level of play, and I had seen the culture, and I was like, I can't leave now. This is perfect. This is what I want. This is what soccer culture should be. So I need to stay. I need to make it happen. So that really helped create the culture in England. Really helped create my mindset to want to stay there.
Of course, and like you said, like you started from the 12th division, which I don't even know the name. What do you call that? I just know the National League. I don't know what is below that. And and you went on to
Well,
play
this
all.
one was like Ryman Premier League. It was called the Ismailia South League.
Okay,
Yeah, it was leagues you'd never heard of. That's for sure. All
definitely. And
leagues I'd never heard of.
and you went on to play all the way to Premier League. Like, did you like when you started all the way in the bottom? There's a 12th league. It's it looks like a very big task, maybe even as big as climbing Everest or even bigger than that. So, did you imagine that you would play in the Premier League in the future?
I think you have to take those things one step at a time. For me, it was land in England and find a team. From there, it was, find a team that's better than that one and see if you can get a tryout. But the only way you're going to get a tryout is if you play well for the 12th division team. So again, kind of controlling what you can control. So, again, it was me land, find a team. Okay, now be the best player on that team as fast as you can. That will warrant a new tryout at a better level. And a good thing about England is that everything is so small. And so, everyone has eyes. And if you're doing a good job, the next coach would know the next coach. And then that coach knows a scout. And then that scout knows his professional team. So the web is very small there. As long as you can be seen and play well, you can move quite quickly up the levels. So that's kind of what was my mindset. It was keep playing well, keep controlling what you can control, and just make sure you're monitoring that level. And as long as it's going up, it doesn't need to go like that. It can go like that, very slowly, or at a pace of yours. But as long as it's still moving up, don't stop. So
Of course,
that was my mindset.
yeah, of course, and like I just wanted to ask, like, of course, when you hear your story, like starting from all the way down, what is the major difference playing in 12th division and in the Premier League?
I mean, I always say that the Premier League is the best in the world in the box, in the final third. So it slows down in the midfield, but then in the box is where it really comes alive. And so I was a defender. So I always felt like, say, for instance, the first division was very physical. The players are a little bit bigger. They're more physical. They'll lead with elbows. But in the Premier League, you're dealing with the best players in the world every week. So the level in the box, the sharpness to get to a ball, the ability to stay switched on and mentally aware, that kind of stuff is something that it was so important for me at that highest level. It's the little things and not giving that person a chance in the 94th minute in the box when that person is the best in the world. You give them that one chance at that one time, that 1 second you switch off, they put it in the corner of the net because that's why they're the best in the world. And that 92 minutes of work is over. So for me, the biggest switch of the Premier League was just the mental capacity and the sharpness in the boxes.
So, like, if you had to compare, of course, this is very unfair. If you had to compare, like, Premier League and World Cup, which one would you choose?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the World Cup, just because, of what it all means from a deeper perspective, like every country, pays attention, you really represent your country on a much larger scale. So, I play in the Premier League for Watford. I'm still representing my country, but on a smaller scale, and I always like the fact of when you play for your country, it's something bigger. And so I've always liked that about the World Cup and the standard at those tournaments.
Of course, and football in the States of late has boomed, maybe because of the huge profile of players that are all over Europe, and back then when you played, do you think it was looked down upon?
I mean, I think it was. I don't know if it is anymore. I think, again, the culture here is growing. What most people don't know is, soccer culture in North America started in 1974. So, when I played for Watford in England, on our patch and our badge, it said 1881. So almost 100 years behind is North American soccer culture. So, I think there was catching up to do. I think there still is catching up to do, but it's definitely going at a faster pace. And so I think it's only a matter of time, not too much time, before it's going to be right up there with the best leagues in the world. But it's not quite to the level that it needs to be.
Of course, and you have a lot of other leagues, like MLS was one of the biggest league after Europe, maybe like 5 years back. But now you have the Chinese league, or you have the Indian league, which has like kind of boomed up in the last maybe half decade or something. Do you think like that is like stopping the growth of MLS, which probably would have accelerated at a higher speed?
I mean, I don't know if it's stopping the growth. I think it's just, I take each country as kind of its own thing. It's hard to compare other countries because of that growth state. When did professional soccer in India, come into? So you guys again are the same. It's very far behind, but with technology, with a fan base that is culturally appropriate because they love football. It's just they never had a team to support locally. If you can create the culture, then it can move fast. And I think that's what's happening now in America. It's finally starting to be created. The cultures, towns are having their own chants. Teams have their own colors. It's creating a social identity. So again, those things, it takes years to build those things. And I don't mean 2 years. I mean 10 years, 15, 25 years. So again, I think it's moving. And I think, it's hard to compare against other countries because the culture is just so different.
Of course, and I'll move back to your career, and you spent a large chunk of your career at Watford. How do you look back at your time there?
Well, I love it, and again, I took pride in staying there for 7 seasons, and from an American that walked there to becoming club captain, it was a great honor for me, and I think the community always respected me for that and my journey and how I got to that, and I think so. I've always had a great rapport with the fans and had a great relationship with the club, and it's a family club. You feel that. You feel that when you're a part of that Watford community. And I think that's always been a great part of what I've loved about that club. And to play over 200 games for one club is also a great feat and an honor for me. So again, it's something that, it's built in the terraces, but now I'm a part of that community. It's just, I feel like I'm a member of that community for life. And that's what makes sports special. And that's what makes the relationship between players and the fans special too. And, I've always appreciated that relationship.
Of course. And my next 2 questions, it's more hypothetical and it's more alternative reality or alternative history questions, do you think if you would have stayed back in the States and probably performed similarly to what you performed in England all the way to the Premier League that you captained Watford, do you think you would have achieved the same level of name and maybe fame and played in the World Cup if you had done it in US?
Hard to say. I would say probably not. I did, because again, I did get fast tracked once I made it to the first division in England. It did fast track me to the national team. And I do think that when you play in Europe as an American, you do have more of a spotlight on you to be chosen. So yeah, I think it probably would have slowed me down. And it's hard to say, but I would definitely say it would have slowed me down for sure.
And the second one is, if you are not a footballer, what would you have been?
Well, I went to school for industrial design, so product design. So I would have been most likely a designer of some type.
Of course, and coming back to reality, and you have a lot of players of who have chosen to represent US. You have Pulisic at Chelsea. Then you have McKennie at Juventus, Sergio Dest, who is being rumored to be linked with Bayern Munich and Barcelona. Do you think like this will change maybe the way the game is in the States? Like if one of these players go on to win the Ballon d'Or, does it change the full game?
I don't know if it changes the whole game, because I think we've progressed to this point. Again, the fact that we haven't had an American in the conversation, and again, I'm in Vancouver now, so Alphonso Davies, the Canadian that played for Bayern Munich, is very much on topic of conversation of, he's 20 years old and he's already one of the best left backs, if not the best left back in the world. So, and I played with him when he was 15 years old and I was the captain of the Whitecaps. So to see him grow, but again, first you have to present them with the challenges first, and then he's got to start, and then he's got to be the player we all think he can be. And Pulisic's doing the same thing for Chelsea. And, you'd think that North American soccer culture, which has been around for 40 years now, you'd think maybe that there would have been one by now. So in a way, I'm a little bit disappointed there hasn't been one. But now that there is, I do think that they're capable of winning a Ballon d'Or, for sure. Again, part of it is the belief system and the mindset it takes. And it took an American to get to that point where you can believe that you can be the best in the world. First, I'm American. How can I get to Europe? But now that we have enough players in Europe and that mentality has been built, now you can be that player and go, I'm going to move to Europe. I'm going to be the best European there is. I'm going to be the best player there is. So, but again, first you have to graduate to being able to think that you have the confidence to go play in the Premier League. Then you can be the best player in the world, because you can't be the best player in the world if you're not playing in those leagues. So now we're starting to build that mindset that players can go over there and be that good player. So I think, again, it's just a long step of the way. And I think we're getting finally to the point where players like the Pulisics or the Davies can go and be the best player in the world.
No, but I feel like that's even more down to the lifestyle US offers. Like someone like Timothy Ware, who is the son of George Ware. He's the I think president of his country, but he represents states. So it's more of a lifestyle that they choose, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And again, you can't just be the best player in the world. You do it by choice, because of the sacrifice and the things it takes to get there. Putting yourself out there, taking risks, going to a club that you maybe at the time might think you're going to not play at. There's all those factors of confidence, of building, that get you to the point where you can be that player. So, again, I think you're right. I think but just like anything, it's a mentality that needs to be built.
No, like when you mention someone like Alphonso Davies, like he has come to, like, you played with him. Like when you see his backstory, he has done it all the way from Vancouver Whitecaps to Bayern Munich. Like, like there's a proper line. But someone, I don't know much about these people, but even they would have a backstory. But someone like Sergio Dest, maybe he was always comfortable in Europe, in that environment, like because he was eligible there. Maybe he had a background there. Probably, he didn't have to go through the same struggle like someone like Davies have went through. Like from where he came to all the way, and such a huge success. I wanted to ask you, like you said, like when you were the captain, he was 15. Did you imagine he'll get to that heights at such a young age?
Not at the time. When I watched him come on for his first appearance and play really, really well, and again, he was a boy. He was a boy, and I watched him come on with confidence, and he was fearless. And he scored. And I just thought, that's the kind of mentality it takes to be the phenom we all talk about. You know what I mean? You talked about it. Who's the next phenom that's going to come and be the best player in the world? It's kind of like when Wayne Rooney came on for Everton the first time when he was 16. And he hit like a 25-yard volley off the front top post into the top corner. Because everyone would have been talking about him forever. And he's going to be England's next big thing. He's going to win England the next World Cup. But at first, you got to have the confidence to step out there and think you can. And then you got to be there and take your first appearance as a kid. And then you have to have the confidence and skill set to go and do that. That, for me, is the mentality it takes to be the best in the world. And so then I saw that at 16. And I thought he could go on to be a very, 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 very world-class player.
And I'll ask you, this might be a very difficult question, maybe put you in a spot. Out of the present the Americans playing in Europe, whom do you rate the most?
I mean, I'd say Pulisic right now, because he's taken the leadership role the most. You can tell he's not only because the U.S. has kind of put him in that role for his national team, but I do think that from his experience, he has the best and most ability to become that player because of his youth abilities at Dortmund. He's been in that system for a long time. Des and some of these other guys, they're newer to it all. And so I think Pulisic has the best opportunity to do so.
Of course, and I'll get back to your career. And did you ever plan into getting into coaching or something after your career?
Well, I run a youth program now. That's kind of where I live. For me, because of my story and because, again, I have a lot of other expertise in design and, football is a huge passion of mine, but youth leadership in general is where I live. I can teach a kid how to bend a ball or how to hit a cross or head a ball. But for me, I want to teach a kid how to be themselves and how to find themselves and how to, take risks and how to get to know themselves, because if you do a bunch of things, I feel like soccer, because of my experience, was more one-dimensional, and I am someone that really had learned a lot of other dimensions, within my story. And so I want to teach that. So I would rather teach a broad youth program than to teach soccer in general. And so that's kind of where I live now. I run a youth program that teaches many ways of learning through many different things. And that's really where my power to give back, I think, really lies. And of course I can coach football. And again, maybe as I get older, but right now I really concentrate on a broad youth scope.
Of course, and as a defender, which player was the most difficult that you played against?
Good question. Didier Drogba was probably the most difficult player that I played against through my career. Again, I was a guy that was, I'm not the biggest. I could jump and be athletic, but, the guys like him that were like 6'2", 6'3", a little bit heavier, but just as fast, just as physical, those are the guys I had a harder time with. The big guys, I could make their feet move and be athletic, so I could do okay. But those guys that were like 6'2", 6'3", strong, athletic, those are the guys I had the hardest problem with. And we happened to draw Chelsea in the FA Cup like 2 or 3 years in a row. So I ended up playing him like 5 or 6 times in 3 years. And he had a game every time.
Of course, and he has traveled many clubs like that.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
So I wanted to ask, as a center back, which formation did you enjoy playing in the most?
I like to 4-4-2. I liked having a big center half next to me. So when as a center back partnership, my best years were always with a bigger kind of again, a guy that liked to compete with the bigger players, where I could cover in behind and then deal with the players that like to come to the ball on their feet, and I could close them down very quickly. But I could win things in the air against them a lot. So because I could jump high. So like that was kind of my partnership in center back. So 4-4-2 with a big center back next to me was my favorite.
And who was best partner that you had?
I think it was the year we got promoted to the Premier League. He was a big Scottish defender named Malky Mackay. He really taught me about the communication and the leadership side of the game, about like as a center half, you can win balls and play good defense. But if you're not organizing your team, if you're not using your voice to organize things in front of you, and that's half the battle for a center back. And so he really taught me that game. So he as a partnership, he taught me about the communicative side of the game. And then the other guy was a guy named Oguchi Aniewu, who played for the U.S. national team. Again, big athlete. Really, as a back four, that U.S. national team for me was my favorite back four to play in. It was a guy in Germany. He played for Hanover. Carlos Bocanegra, who was our captain, he played on the left. And then Gooch and myself played in the middle. So that foursome as a back four was my favorite for sure. That was the World Cup foursome.
Of course, and going back in time, did you have any player that you idolized growing up?
I mean, my favorite center half before I moved to England and I actually got to play against him was Nemanja Vidic, who he just showed the toughness that I really like to play with, and his athleticism. But he'd score on a corner. He would have guys like Thierry Henry, and I could tell he was just making them disrupting him. You know what I mean? And I like that about him. So I tried to mirror my game on him.
And what do you think of Van Dijk? Like many of them rate him one of the best in the Premier League era. What do you think of him?
Oh, I mean, I would definitely do the same. He kind of reminds me of a younger Vincent Kompany, where you're good on the ball, you command your box, you can win everything in the air physically, but you can take a touchdown without looking. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff, where he really has all of the components that you need. Because usually defenders, again, if you're big, tall, and you're athletic in the box, usually your feet aren't very good. But again, he has everything, and I think his leadership and his presence alone gives him that title for sure.
Of course, and you're talking about yourself. Like as a player, if you had to pick up one strength of yours, which was your best ability, and one weakness, what would that be?
I think my favorite, or not my favorite, probably my best, was just this willingness to compete. I didn't care who I was playing against, if it was Wayne Rooney or if it was some guy in the park. My willingness to compete always made for a hard day for my opponent, and that always made me play well. And so I think that was my best attribute. And then my worst was probably my left foot passing out of the back. I couldn't take a ball, push it out, and then hit a left-footed drive to my win back. I never got to play that ball because I wasn't as good. So I would say that was probably my worst.
Of course, and as a player, were you superstitious? Like some of them wear the same shin pads for maybe throughout their career. Did you have anything like that?
I mean, I definitely had a way that I put my shin pads on. And then the other tradition that I kind of had of a ritual was when I became captain of the team. So I was 7 of the 10 years I played pro, I was captain of my team. And I had this thing I would do with the kit man. So that's our equipment manager. So he's the guy that folds our jerseys, puts them out and gets us ready for games and stuff. And he always had my captain's armband on my stuff. So, but I always had him put it on me. It's like, cause you can't, it's hard to put a captain armband on yourself because it's with Velcro. So you have to have somebody kind of put it on for you. And so I would always have him put it on, because for me, it was like, I was at the top of the team, and he was what most people would consider like at the bottom of that team. But for me, it was this relationship where there's no difference between the top and the bottom, is that we're all in this together. So it was like this thing where he would put on my armband and we give each other a big hug and be like, okay, we're in this together. Let's go. And so that was kind of, for me, one of my rituals that I did. It was the way that I really felt my purpose, to make sure that I was representing everyone on my team.
Of course, and if you had to choose one coach who had the biggest influence in you in your career, who would that be?
I would probably say A.D. Boothroyd. So he was the manager that got us promoted to the Premier League, and we had our Premier League season. I would say him because he really just instilled belief in me to think that I could be that good. The other one was Bob Bradley, my national team coach, and I would say him because there was a time where I got to play, and it was because the guy in front of me was injured. And the next game, because I played so well, but I was a new team new to the team. And at that level, reputations mean a lot. And the guy in front of me who had a big reputation, he had like 60 caps for the team already and was the captain of the team. So he didn't have to leave me in there, but he stayed with me. And he said, no, we're going to move Carlos to the left back, and Jay, you're going to continue to start in the midfield. And for a manager at that level to put faith in me, to do that, for me, was also a big belief system thing. So I would say those two managers were the best.
Of course, and you won the Gold Cup, and I think the draw was out today. What is the realistic expectations from this US men's national team? Do you think they should win it?
I think they should qualify. I mean, they didn't even qualify last time. So first things first. I think we have to get back on track as a U.S. national team. I think, you touched on it earlier. We have good players. There's definitely more than enough players in that locker room to do the job. But again, just like last time, there was too. So now it's about doing the job. And so I think that they're going to have a different mentality this time around. I think that they take it a little bit more seriously. So the first things first, I think the U.S. will qualify for this World Cup. And then once you get in a World Cup, anything can happen. We were, even in the Confederations Cup, the U.S., we made it to the final against Brazil in 2009. So the teams are good enough. You just gotta there's some things need to go your way from the games, and the rest is the players in the group that needs to believe that they can win those.
What about the Gold Cup?
I would say the World Cup is very similar. Any world tournament is, again, you have to stay healthy. You have to have a belief system that you can win that tournament, and then you have to have some of the players play the best games that they've ever played before. So, and that between those three things is how you win a World Cup. And so I think all those factors need to happen, but you need to get there first.
Of course, and speaking of a career, if you had to choose one moment, which is the most standout moment, which one would that be?
Standing on the World Cup halfway line, first game against England, and the national anthem, your national anthem, with the hand on your heart. That moment when you know that you're one of 11 people to represent your country in the biggest sporting event on the planet is by far the best feeling you could ever have on a soccer field, for sure.
So I think the game you spoke of, I think Gerrard scored early in the game, right?
He did.
I think within the first 2-3 minutes or something, I think he scored the goal.
It was, yeah. I don't remember the exact minute, but it was definitely in the first 10 minutes of the game. And I was tasked with Wayne Rooney, who was the Premier League Player of the Year that year for Manchester United. So, technically, I was marking the best player in the world, and so it was a good game in the end, and I played one of the better games I ever played. So at the end of that game, when we ended up drawing 1-1, it was and again, it was funny, the story between that, because if you remember, the England goalie Robert Green spilled his ball into the net, but we missed a sitter in the 80th minute to tie. Would have been to tie that. So I do think that on a chance level, it was a fair result. But it's funny because my agent, who was at the stadium that day, the only two players he had in the World Cup were me and Robert Green. So it was kind of funny story for what went on that day.
No, I remember watching that game, and because England are generally portrayed as the big powerhouse of football, and they are expected to win every tournament that they take part in. We thought they're going to thrash USA because they got an early goal, and that season they were in top form, most of the players, but you all got a draw. That is amazing.
Yeah, we make the most of those opportunities. I had a smile on my face the whole time, just because it's you can't take those situations for granted. You make the most of them always, and win, lose, or draw. I've always been so appreciative that I got to have those experiences and be a part of them, and got to make the most of them. So yeah, always happy when I get to talk about these things.
Of course, I'll ask you one final question. It's you've had experience, you played in Europe probably when not many US players would venture out there, take their adventurous step, especially as a defender. You would have forwards going, you had Dempsey and you had few other players, but as a defender it's a very big task. And if you had to give an advice to a young player starting out, what advice would you give that person?
The first thing is get to know yourself. You can't be the player you want to be if you don't believe that you're that player. So I think the first thing is figure out who you are on not only in life, but also on the football field. Is because, you really, when you get to the top level, you have to refine so much to get to the point where you're, representing your country, for instance. And that comes with really getting to know who you are and what you represent. Because when you get to the highest level, teamwork it's 11 people doing a big job, but at the end of the day, it's you doing your job first. And so that's the first thing you need to worry about before you can worry about wins, losses, and what goes on the team. It's controlling your own performance. And so the first thing I would say is get to know yourself and know the kind of player that you want to be and who you are, because then you'll get the best performances out of yourself, which will then create the wins and the tournaments and the being picked on good teams.
Definitely. And I'll sneak in one question. As a defender, whom would you least likely want to face, Ronaldo or Messi?
Well, I've played against both of them, so I would say Messi, mainly because he was just a little bit more elusive, so he was just harder to get a hold of, and that made my day a little bit more difficult than Ronaldo. But I would say when I played against Ronaldo, that was when he was at Manchester United, so he was just starting to get to the player that he is, and so now I don't know, but I would still say Messi.
Of course, I knew that might be controversial. So, but on that note, Jay, Thank you so much for talking to me, and I wish you all the best with your endeavors, especially with Rise and Shine. What you're doing is amazing. Hope you can, probably you can inspire many more players to come out of the US and probably they'll go and win the World Cup. You never know. And hope we can talk again soon. Take care, stay safe. Bye.
My friend, no problem. Till next time.
Thank you so much.
Player-wise, it would have to be Steven Gerrard, just because again, before he became a journalist, he was someone I just admired massively in terms of the absolute complete footballer. I think if you were trying to make a footballer in a factory, it would be Steven Gerrard, someone who, I think JV Carragher summed it up best once when he said, Steven Gerrard's biggest strength is he doesn't have any weaknesses.
The stadium. I don't see really need to do that, mainly such a big spending. But it's true that it would be a fantastic stadium. That's not bad, but you have to be careful. And mainly at this moment when we are going to face a very difficult time.